Let's get started.
Welcome to the Financial Purpose Podcast. All opinions expressed by me or guests of the podcast are solely our own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Life Moves Wealth Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for any investment decisions. Clients of Life Moves Wealth Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. Welcome to the Financial Purpose Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. This is episode 47. And I'm laughing a little if you're listening because we're playing the intro and I'm just like sitting here grooving, and Josh over the controls is making fun of me, and I'm just like grooving at the intro music. I picked that intro music, so I like it. But anyway, thanks for coming back. Welcome back. We took the week off for Independence Day. Hopefully you had a good time with your family doing something good, doing something very, very wet, red, white, and blue. Happy birthday, America. It was a great weekend. We were camping. Josh, you were camping. So, yeah, it's a good time to be out and enjoying this beautiful country that we have. So, today, I was thinking about some of the things that kind of cross between business financials and personal financials. And it's a little bit because I just crossed over a finish line of a kind of a major milestone. For the business, I just received another designation, the Certified Business Exit Consultant. I've been working on that for about a year. It was a lot of coursework. It was a 100-question exam, and then I had to write an exit plan delivered to a real business owner with a real exit strategy. And that process took about 6-7 months. Finally was able to get that done. Did my interview, passed the peer review of my exit plan, and was awarded the designation. So a couple more letters of alphabet soup behind my name, which is perfect, but it has me just thinking more along the lines of how to better serve business owners. And when we think about exits, if you go back a couple of episodes when I had John Chiacchio on, we talked about what it means to think about monetizing the business rather than selling or rather than exiting, and really very much along the line of Stephen Covey. If you're going to think about what you're going to do as the final strategy or what the finish line looks like, you better think about how you're going to run the race so that you cross the finish line in the best possible shape. And so that's what I want to talk about today is some of the areas where I like to call it financial spaghetti. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, whatever you're doing in your business, those financials very, very much cross and touch and commingle. Hopefully not commingle, that might be the wrong word, but it very much impacts what you're doing and what your personal financial results look like. So I thought of 5 areas that I work with people to help them better understand, better track, and then even maximize 5 areas, 5 key factors of business finance, and also they're quite frankly very similar to personal finance. So we're going to compare those today. We're going to talk through each of those areas, and I think it's going to be helpful to anyone who's listening. And so no charts today, no graphs, none of that fun stuff. So it should be fairly easy to follow. So the very first factor or key principle that we talk through, especially when we're working with business owners, but also for people who don't own a business, the factors remain the same. So I'm going to talk about it on the personal finance side and then also on the business finance side as we go through each of them. So the first one is cash flow management versus profitability. Now, this is one where some people think they are one and the same. They are actually quite different. So cash flow management, very simply, just like it sounds, it tracks the inflow of money, it tracks the outflow of money, and it's what we look at to ensure whether or not the business can meet its day-to-day financial obligations. So cash flow is very much, as I often say, it's like the blood running through your veins. The blood stops pumping, the body drops, and it's the same thing with your business. If the cash stops flowing, the business will fail. And the day-to-day operations are very important when we're thinking of cash flow because it's the only way that you can avoid liquidity issues. And this becomes common for a lot of business owners, especially either earlier in their business journey, or if they're a seasoned owner, it can happen when there are economic disruptions or when the business is maybe not running efficiently. And it's where the owner has to inject a lot of personal capital to keep things like the lights on and the paychecks, going and payroll funded and that kind of thing. Those generally will signal liquidity issues, and there's usually a cash flow problem. Now, profitability related, but it measures the difference between revenue and expenses. So not the same as cash flow. It does not help track cash flow, but what we look at is at the end of the whatever term you're looking at. It could be the week, the quarter, the day. For some business, they run on a day-to-day journal. It could be the end of the half year. It could be the end of the year. Hopefully, you're looking at it more than once a year. But your profitability is once you have received all of your income for that period, you've paid all the expenses for the period, whatever is left over, that's your profitability. Now, I know some people who think that if they have some money in the bank at whatever current snapshot in time that is, that it means that they're profitable. And that's actually not true. It's the same with personal finance, which we'll go to here in a minute. But just because there's money in the bank doesn't mean that you're profitable. And just because you're profitable doesn't necessarily mean at any given time there's a lot of money in the bank. And so that's a very fluid thing, natural occurrence that happens. So in the personal finance side, cash flow management, very similarly, but we typically would think of it as budgeting. And so with personal finance, your budget is how much money are you bringing in every month, how much money are you spending every month, and what's left over. And whatever's left over, typically you want to put into savings or some kind of later use type fund. And hopefully in your personal finance, you do have money left over, and hopefully in your business, the same is true as well. Managing cash flow in personal finance is very critical. It helps you avoid taking on extra debt. And when you avoid taking on extra debt, it frees up cash flow for you to be able to build wealth. And that's the key. Instead of profitability in personal finance, we're going to look at net worth. So it's very similar, but the net worth is the difference between your assets and your liabilities. And that indicates a measure of financial health. And so net worth is one of the key things that we look at in personal financial planning. We want to see net worth growing over time because that's how we know that your outcomes that you intend to have later in life, we think of that as retirement. You can't do that if your net worth is negatively declining. And so we want to see net worth growth. We want to see positivity there. But again, it indicates financial health, but it's not a marker of cash flow. So again, they're similar, they're related, but they are not the same. Okay, point number 2 is the impact of interest rates and inflation. Now, this has been a hot topic over the past couple of years, and no pun intended on the hot, but man, it's like 116 today, and I can feel it behind these lights. It is warm. But that's been a hot topic for the past couple of years, interest rates and inflation. And more people, I think, because it's been such a popular thing, are in tune with inflation and the fact that things cost more. Maybe they're in tune with the fact that because of inflation and because of what the Fed is having to do to fight inflation, that they're now getting paid more to have cash in the bank and to have high yield savings accounts and things like that. But I don't think that a lot of people are very well in tune with what these two things, interest rates and inflation, how the movement of those two things actually impact your future use of money. And so in business finance, interest rates are going to drastically impact the cost of borrowing for things like expansion or operations or investments or equipment or, new ideas, new inventory, things like that. Higher rates, which is where we have right now, higher borrowing rates, definitely limit growth potential. They also make it a little more difficult to be profitable because the higher your borrowing cost, the higher your debt load, which is going to drag on your profitability. And that brings me to inflation because the cost of what you have to buy to run your business or what you have to do to run your business increases when inflation is high. And so it does also limit your purchasing power, but because things cost more, it does drag on profit margins and it pulls those down. And that can really be a challenge for any great business because you can go pre-pandemic and have a very healthy looking set of financials and be running essentially very much the same level of business. You could have recovered from the pandemic, but your numbers look a little bit less attractive than they might have 5 or 6 years ago. And that purely is the impact of a higher rate of inflation and the higher rates, interest rates, that we've seen over the past 2 years as the Fed works on monetary policy to try to bring inflation down. Now, on the personal finance side, these two things are very, very similar. Interest rates and what the Fed does with monetary policy, it influences mortgage rates. It influences credit card rates. Now, remember, the Fed does not set borrowing rates, but because of where monetary policy is and because of what the Fed funds rate does, that will have an influence on what it costs to borrow money from banks and from other institutions. And so while we're paying more for our mortgages and our credit cards and our car loans, we're also getting more money on our cash that's sitting in banks. And so as rates come down, we would expect to see the money that we're earning on cash start to come down as well. And we would hope that our borrowing rates come down. I know I have quite a few friends in the real estate and the mortgage industries, and they would love to see a rate cut and see rates come down because it will open the door for more people to be able to buy homes and to be able to afford homes. Now, I happen to think that if we do get a drop in rates, that it's going to cause the short term, the cost of housing to go up again because of just supply and demand dynamics, but we'll see when that happens. But still, lower borrowing rates would be okay for a lot of people, and they would be very helpful for quite a few people who are out there waiting to be able to afford to buy a home or to buy a new car or something like that. Inflation, very much like in the business, it reduces the purchasing power of your money. It affects the cost of living, and it affects your ability to save at a higher rate. And so if it costs you suddenly more money to go to the grocery store or to put gas in the car or to go out to eat or to take your family on a vacation, you're going to start to make choices about which of those things are important and which ones are not. And that is a direct impact on the economy. And that's typically a signal of what's happening with interest rates and how that can be a limiting factor. Okay, we're moving on to number 3. I am wiping the sweat off the side of my brow. It is warm. All right. Number 3, the importance of financial forecasting. Now, in business, financial forecasting is incredibly important because you want to have an idea of what your future revenue... my man Josh just put a fan over here, and it's like sweet relief. Okay. The impact of... all right, financial forecasting. I got distracted. That felt so nice. Thank you. Okay, so predicting future revenues, expenses, capital needs, these things are all very important. In a business, you want to anticipate where cash flows are going. You want to anticipate what you're going to need to do to continue to make investments in business growth. You want to anticipate what things are going to cost, what your suppliers are going to demand for payment terms and things like that. And so you always want to make sure that your financials are updated, that you know where your business ratios are. And if you've never looked at your business ratios, and if you don't know what I'm talking about with business ratios, there's quite a few to look at. Send an email to info@lifemoveswealth.com, and I'll be happy to get with you and talk you through what some of these key performance indicators or KPIs are that you're going to want to be looking at. And I may put a sample of these ratios. Actually, I will do that in the show notes so that way you can see what they are. So head over to lifemoveswealth.com. Click on the blog section, and I'll have these in the show notes. But you want to know what your business looks like. You want to know what your financial health is. And you're going to want to run scenarios. You're going to want to say, what if sales decline by X percent? What if cost increase by X percent? What if we hire 2 more people to fill the demand that we're expecting? What if we have to reduce our workforce by 3% or whatever that number is? Or what if we lose a key person? Or any number of scenarios. What if we buy this new building? What if we buy the new building and rent it? What if we can't have rent for a while? What if we have a vacancy factor of 8? Right? All of these things, you want to run these scenarios so that way you can understand, based on whatever happens, you're not going to be financially surprised. Now, this is very, very similar in personal finance, and it's very similar to budgeting. But financial forecasting in personal finance involves planning for future income, planning for future expenses, planning for future savings, putting money aside for college, knowing what it's going to potentially cost your child to get an education in 10 years or 12 years or 14 years or 18 years, right? Whatever that is, based on the current rates of inflation of education, which are quite high, you're going to want to have some insight into what that's going to cost. You're going to want to know how much money do you need to live on every month if you were to lose your job for a couple of months, or if you were to decide to quit your income-producing work for a couple of months to start your own business, or if you're going to start thinking about retirement or your next stage or whatever that is. You want to be able to, from a personal finance standpoint, put that on paper, put the calculator to it, so that way you understand what's going to work. It's the same thing if you're looking at, buying a home or any other major cash moving investment, regular reviews and adjustments on your personal finance. And by the way, this is what we do in personal financial planning. You want to make sure that any of those scenarios help you stay on track with what's most important to you, and it allows you to understand what you need to do to keep the main things, right? Okay, the fourth key thing here that we work through with people is understanding financial statements. And on the business side, these is going to be, the big three is your balance sheet, your profit and loss statement, and your cash flow statement, or it might be called your income statement. Sometimes people call the income statement the profit and loss and whatever. But balance sheet, profit and loss, and your cash flow statement, those are the big three, and they talk to each other. There is information that flows through each of those three sheets back and forth based on what's happening in the business. And so the balance sheet is going to show assets and liabilities. It's going to show owner equity, and it's a snapshot in time of the financial position and the financial health of the company. And if you look at your balance sheet, this is where you're going to have all of your fixed assets in your computers and your desks and your vehicles and your credit cards and the cash in the bank and any investments that you have and the money that you've put in as the owner for the business and the money that you've taken out as the owner of the business and the money that you've held in retained earnings. All of that stuff's going to be on your balance sheet. When we look at your P&L, that's going to show all of the revenues and the expenses, and then you're going to have a bottom line. And that, again, is a snapshot in time. So whether you're running it year-to-date or quarterly or semi-annually or monthly or whatever you're doing, hopefully you're looking at those numbers frequently. But the P&L is going to help you track financial efficiency and performance through that time period. So that's a very important one. And frankly, the P&L might be one that you want to look at on a absolute regular basis. And from a KPI standpoint, that's where I pull a lot of data, is from the P&L. So the P&L can very quickly help me understand how well you're running your business based on the revenues and the resources that you have available. Your cash flow statement, that's going to show you, what your cash inflows are, where they're coming from, meaning are they coming from operations? Are they coming from sales? Are they coming from products? Are they coming from services? Are they coming from investing? Are you pushing money out for financing, that kind of thing? So the cash flow statement is going to give you insight into your business's liquidity. And again, liquidity, as I said earlier, is very important because it's the lifeblood of what allows you to continue operating. Now, from a personal finance side, I actually run these exactly the same for personal finance clients as I do for entrepreneur and business owner clients, because everybody, to me, it's the same stuff. So instead of a balance sheet, we have a net worth statement, which does the same thing. It's going to show me your assets and your liabilities and what you own, what you owe, where money is going, where money has gone. what that looks like from a ratio standpoint. And again, that's going to be a snapshot in time, just like the balance sheet is. And in fact, with my clients, when we talk about the net worth statement, I call it the personal balance sheet because it's the same thing. Personal finance, instead of a P&L, you're going to have an income and an expense statement. Same thing. It's going to show us what's happening in cash flow, what earnings are coming in, what money is going out. And then again, you're going to have a bottom line. And for a lot of people, this is on a monthly basis because that's how most people will look at their budget or their cash flow is what's happening month over month over month. And this is important to look at because no 2 months are the same. You never receive the exact same amount of money, even on a salary. There's some months where you receive more paychecks than others. If you're paid weekly, sometimes you're going to get 5 checks. If you're paid biweekly, sometimes you're going to get 3. You're never going to have the same exact amount of money every single month for the year. You're also never going to spend the same amount of money every month for the year because the price of the basic things that you do fluctuates. And sometimes you do more things and sometimes you do less things. And sometimes you have emergency spending and sometimes it costs more to take the dog to the vet or whatever you're doing. You're never going to spend the same amount of money every single month. So you want to look at this on a trailing basis and try to identify trends, exactly like we do for businesses. And then finally, the cash flow statement, very similar to budgeting, very much the same thing with businesses. It's going to detail where your cash or your monthly inflows or your income is coming from. And again, it's going to help us to manage liquidity to make sure that you can continue to operate and honor your obligations. And if there are liquidity issues or bottlenecks, then we're going to go back into the other 2 statements and look at where that liquidity is falling short and what we might need to switch up or restructure with debt or cut on spending or whatever to free up more liquidity. Because again, free cash flow is where it's at, right? Free cash flow, it's blood in your body. It allows you to continue moving. Incredibly important. Okay, the last thing of the 5 that I work on with folks is understanding the role of working capital. Now, I've alluded to this a couple times throughout the other points, but working capital is just basically the difference between your current assets and your current liabilities. In business, we're going to call this the quick ratio. And we want to understand how efficient your operations are, and we want to make sure that you have more assets or more cash available to pay the current or the when we say current liabilities, we're thinking about things that are due within less than 1 year. And so we're not talking about long-term debts. We're not talking about mortgages. We're not talking generally about credit cards, things like that. Although sometimes credit cards would be considered a current liability. And so we want to make sure that we understand what that means for your business. And so we're going to look at that. It's short-term stuff. Can you repay? Do you have enough assets or enough cash on hand to repay everything that would be due as a current liability within that period? And again, usually we're looking at 1 year. And this really is a great ratio or a great quick check on how well the business is being ran, how liquid you are, and how well you're able to handle unexpected expenses throughout the time. No different than personal finance. This we typically are going to say, we're going to look at this as usually an emergency fund. For my clients, I look at it as a cash flow reserve target. And we say, okay, your monthly expenses generally are in this range. Your income generally is in this range. Your income is volatile. Your income is not volatile. It's stable. It's not stable. It's predictable. It's not predictable, right? We look at those factors. And then together we work on how much money should be set aside in the case of an emergency. And just because it's an emergency fund doesn't mean it has to live in a low-yield bank account. It can very much live in a high-yield bank account. It can live in a brokerage account that is invested very specifically to provide liquidity, but also allow for some growth and some yield potential. But we want to make sure that we understand what your number is, because for some people, it's 3 months of my expenses. For some people, 3 months of expenses is an awful lot of money, and so it doesn't make sense to have that amount sitting in the bank. So for those people, they might say, I want to have at least 15,000 or 25,000 or 42,000 or whatever the number is. And so that's what we work toward. That's our emergency reserve or our cash reserve target. And of course, if we have cash reserve, then we have liquidity if something comes up. And that really is very important. That's how we meet the short-term needs. That's how we can also take advantage of opportunities that come up. So if you're looking to at some point buy a new house and you have enough liquidity and something comes along, you can buy it. If you're in need of a new car, you can do that. If you have a chance to maybe buy into a business, you can do that. If you have a chance to make an investment because the market goes down, you can do that. And that's what liquidity enables you to do. It gives you more choices, and it gives you certainly a lot of flexibility. So those 5 things, again, number 1, cash flow management versus profitability. Number 2, the impact of interest rates and inflation. Number 3, the importance of financial forecasting. Number 4, understanding financial statements. And number 5, the role of working capital. Again, these are 5 things that I want more people to have a better understanding of, again, so that way we can track it and we can maximize the results over time. So if these are 5 things that are kind of foreign to you, if you own a business or even if you don't, but you're not sure where you stand on those 5 things, certainly it's a great opportunity for you to either do a little bit of research, get a little bit of financial education, or reach out and find someone who can help you understand these. And certainly if you're without good advice, or if you've heard this episode and you have questions on any of these, please send an email to info@lifemoveswealth.com and just let me know that you listened to episode 47 about the 5 areas of key financial principles, and you'd like more information on how that applies to you. I'd be happy to help. So that's going to be it for this. Like I said, I'll put some information in the show notes. I'll put in just a brief explanation of the ratios that I'm looking at with business owners, and they actually apply to personal finance. We can run the same ratios on personal finance. And in fact, through the personal financial planning, we use the Elements financial health monitoring tool, and Elements does a lot of this work for us on the personal side. And so if you want to understand what Elements is, go to lifemoveswealth.com/our approach. And there's a button you can click there to get your financial health score, and it'll walk you through what that looks like. So number of ways that we can be helpful to you in figuring this stuff out. Please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help. But that's it. I'm going to close the episode. Go be financially awesome, and stay cool. Get a fan. It's really helpful. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. To learn more about your financial purpose, visit lifemoveswealth.com.